good morning. I'm Pete Hoekstra. I'm joined this morning by County Executive Brooks Patterson. Brooks, thanks for being here, and a group of small business owners from Southeast Michigan. We're beginning the announcement tour today for my run to be the next senator from the state of Michigan, and we'd like to thank all of you for being here, but especially the group that I had the opportunity to meet with this morning. It was very interesting. Even before I kind of set the agenda for what we wanted to talk about this morning, this group took off. In one way, they're very, very frustrated. Obviously, the economic conditions in Southeast Michigan, the economic conditions in Michigan, the economic conditions in the country are not what we want them to be. The format this morning was a discussion about how do we get this economy moving? How do we get people back to work? And it was interesting. This group of folks said, Pete, it's very, very simple. We are optimistic about where the economy can go, and the key is get government out of the way. All of them have examples from whether it's Obamacare saying, the president said, hey, go out and hire people. We're not going to hire any folks until we better understand what the ramifications are with Obamacare. There's just a lot of uncertainty there that is holding employers back from adding new people because they don't know what the costs are going to be with Obamacare. A lot of folks here this morning in the construction business, they're saying, it's just hard to get financing, it's hard to get the appraisals, it's hard to get the loan approvals that are necessary to get the housing market back. Why? Dodd-Frank. New legislation supposedly to clean up the market. But in reality, what it's done is put a wet blanket over the mortgage industry and the home building industry. You're not going to get the economy moving again if you don't have a strong, vibrant housing sector. We had a pretty interesting discussion about what's happening in the home building construction industry. Maybe you want to go ahead, Dan. Explain.
Well, some of the OSHA fall protection laws. Just to give you an example, we have these classes and they were taught by my OSHA, and they would tell you if you're putting the joists on the basement wall and on the center beam, you have to be tethered off to something. Well, what do you tether ourselves off to? Well, tied to the ball of the pickup truck. Well, what happens is you send somebody to go get coffee, you have the guy being dragged down the street. But I mean, that's the type of mentality and ideas that OSHA has, EPA has, and the Energy Department has. They are just driving our business into uncompetitiveness with what's out in the market. We will never get this home building business back until we get those regulations voided, basically. Like Pete said, don't have government create jobs, let us create the jobs by getting out of our way. Get government out of the way, and we, the private sector, will bring the jobs back.
Cost of a violation?
$5,000 a day. It really can, and it could be even more, depending on which violations they find. And it's driving people underground, basically. You can't climb up a ladder to fix a gutter on the house unless you're tethered off to something. Who's going to climb up on top of the roof to put the tether hook up there, right? Which is more dangerous, climbing up the ladder or climbing up on top of the roof?
Yeah. It's just one example. We heard all kinds of examples here today about that. The bottom line, and Brooks, maybe you want to address that, this has gotten out of whack. The role of the federal government versus the state versus local, there's no longer a balance. It's the heavy hand of the federal government that's slowing this economy down, and how you experience it here in the county.
There was no script this morning. Everybody told their own story. Excuse me. And everybody told their own story, and nobody around the table said they were overtaxed. Everybody said they were overregulated. So the boogeyman that we talked about all for the first hour during breakfast was the, like you said, the clammy hand of government creating higher costs of doing business. So get rid of some of these regulations, and I think the economy would recover very quickly.
Yes. And like I said, we've got a bunch of folks here who would love to get their businesses growing again, who would love to hire, and they're just saying the current system is not working. It's time to move on. The current system of government trying to create jobs through a stimulus program, the government trying to, believing that they're going to create more jobs with Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, it's not working. We need to reform Washington. and get Washington out of the way. My track record, why I'm running, that's the platform that I took to Washington in '92, successfully, tried to successfully worked on education reform, stood up, it was interesting. The first thing that we talked about today was No Child Left Behind. And again, what the folks here are saying, let our parents, let our local communities, let them reform education. We don't need No Child Left Behind. We don't need the federal government telling us what to do. Rather than the federal government going out and hiring 30 or 40,000 more teachers, which is what the president proposed last week, get rid of No Child Left Behind. It'll leave money in every school district across the country. Repeal Obamacare, do incremental reform through the market, repeal Dodd-Frank, get the wet blanket of that off. I've worked on education. I took on the Teamsters Union back in 1997, 98. We were able to reform the Teamsters and give that union back to its members. After 9/11, I led the fight to reform government, to reform the intel community. So, I think that the message that they're sending to Washington is exactly a message that I can embrace. It's one that I fought for, and it's one that I will continue to fight for. And I believe it's what will get the economy moving again. Less government, more freedom. These folks are the job creators in America, not the federal government. With that, we'll take whatever questions you may have. Take a few questions.
You're advocating for repealing Dodd-Frank?
I have advocated for repealing Dodd-Frank. As I listen to the folks here, and I'm on a small bank board, the rules, the regulations, number one, have significantly increased the cost of lending in the country, so the cost to borrowers, but most importantly, what Dodd-Frank has done, it's created some uncertainty or significant uncertainty in the financial community, and the result is that banks aren't lending. I don't know if anybody else wants to address that. A number of you brought that up this morning.
I had a customer that put 37% down, but they could, and they added a number of extras into their new home, and it was a small home, 2,600 square feet, but they wanted to have a mortgage. So they didn't want to put all their money down on the house, but yet the appraisal would not come up to the value of barely the cost of the materials that were going into the house. Now, one of the extras, and they put wood windows with blind between the glass, very expensive proposition, and they put hickory floors in, ceramic floors. There wasn't a stitch of carpeting in that floor, but that's what they wanted. And the problem is they cannot get what they want, even with that kind of money down. They could have put 50% down, but they wanted to have a cushion because they're, again, so unsure of what's happening in the American economy because of what's happening in Washington.
And we got a mortgage lender here who gave us a very interesting story this morning, right?
Yeah, what's happening with the...
Well, also the head of your organization.
Yeah, he was in Washington a while back and sitting with the Senate Banking Finance Committee, and they were told pretty much point blank that they knew more about our business than we do, and they would tell us what's good for our industry. And at that point, we kind of knew that we were in deep trouble trying to deal with what was happening in Washington.
And the impact of Dodd-Frank on being able to make loans?
It's really hampered us because there's so many regulations right now that we have to deal with. Like Dan mentioned, either the appraisals, pre-approvals are very difficult because of the guidelines they've set up right now as far as conditions to get approved and things along that line. So it really has cut into the overall business that we're able to do and support the housing industry.
But weren't reforms called for so there wouldn't be the financial crisis that got us into the mess in the first place?
It's clearly one of these things where there was a need for reforms, and it was just Washington overreach. Again, the example that was given, it's kind of like, here an organization who is in the lending business on a daily basis, and Congress comes back, the banking committee comes back and says, you know what, we know more about your business than what you do. What an arrogant approach. These are the folks that are meeting with clients and potential home buyers each and every day, and they're coming back and saying, we're sorry, but Dodd-Frank has just put a wet blanket over this. Our bank, the one that I serve on the board, is seeing increasing costs, and so it's kind of like you take a good thing or a need for some reform and you take it and take it way too far, and it's just not working, and it's why, it's why we're seeing the disappointing economic results that we've seen over the last 2.5 years. Yeah.
Well, I think that you're overstating it in the other way, because we definitely had a big meltdown between 2006 and 2008, because anybody who had a pulse could get a loan, and then they passed these toxic things on to all of us stock owners, and we lost our shirt. So I think that there has to be a middle road. I don't think we need to completely get rid of all regulation, but I think we need to have regulations because people aren't honest.
Yeah.
If they can make a buck, they're going to do it.
We're glad you're here. Thanks for being here. We're talking with folks who are in the business each and every day. We're not talking for no regulations. We're talking for reform that enables people to go out and enables people to get this economy moving and put people back to work. Yeah.
Congressman, what have you learned from your last statewide election, your last statewide campaign, and what lessons are you going to take with you into this campaign, and what would you like to do different, or what would you like to do the same?
Well, I think in terms of running a campaign, we're going to run a more balanced campaign. We've always run very much grassroots, and what we did in the last statewide race, we really focused on grassroots. We didn't focus enough on having the organizational structure in place. This time it's going to be a more balanced approach. We'll continue to focus on the grassroots effort. We will also now have more of an organizational basis in place to be able to carry the campaign through a statewide race. So those are the kinds of things that we've learned and that we will build on to be successful. Obviously, the challenge in this race will also be financial. We'll need more money for this Senate race than what we needed for a governor's race. So we will put more emphasis on the fundraising to make sure that we've got the financial resources to move forward. The bottom line is, whether we were talking about the governor's race or what we're talking about here in the Senate race, is we see a state with a tremendous amount of potential to create jobs, a tremendous opportunity to grow an economy and bring Michigan back, and the formula is the same. It's one of the reasons that the governor has endorsed my campaign. The process that he's going through in terms of reinventing Michigan, the process that Brooks has had in place for making sure that Oakland County would be competitive. What they need is they both want a partner in Washington to bring that balance back so that we can get this economy moving again. And that's why we'll have a synergy between what's going on in Washington, what's going on in Lansing, and what's going on at the local level, and bring that partnership back into balance and bring that partnership back into getting this economy moving again.
Last question, please. Any questions from the media?
Okay.
I'll do a follow-up.
Yeah, okay.
How much money do you feel like you need to raise to win?
Well, I think by the end of the campaign, by November of 2012, we will have most likely have had to have raised $12 to $14 million. Yeah, and we're off to a good start. So,
Can you be more specific about that?
We'll be very specific on September 30 when we do our announcement. That's right, when we do our filing. So until then, yeah. But thanks.